So I can't see them.
Okay, so there's an inconsistency here. I mean, some people can see it, some people can't see it. I can't see it, so when I move on, I don't know if I'm actually moving to the next slide or not. And I think to avoid that confusion, if you can bear with it, I'm very sorry, because it's a whole new technical experience to me, in the sense of I don't want to disrupt you and come back 20 minutes later and now the problem is fixed and I have a 20-minute class. I'd much rather give you the class and I'll give you a recording later on if it's okay with everybody. Are you guys fine with that? Can we continue? I mean, you have the slides in front of you. I've tried a different a desktop here to also access, but I'm also battling to access that. And as I said, it may be when with a change of season, Cape Town changes as well. When the season changes, Cape Town and everything in Cape Town changes. So this morning I heard on the radio that the Cape Town city centre, as well as Lauberg and everybody on the Atlantic coastline were requested not to drink their tap water because they are testing it. There's been a few complaints for the water tasting a bit funky, and you don't want to have a stomach bug in the stuff, especially at this time where everybody's very anxious with what happens and globally with the pandemic and expecting a third wave and stuff like that. So people are a bit more cautious than they have been in the past. Those are just things that change. I mean, and obviously we have to, and that's the one thing about especially marketing. As these change and needs and wants of customers change, we have to continuously change. However, I'm also going to take a leaf from my father-in-law, my late father-in-law, who said that if at all you are if you're ever going to rely or want technology to work for you, you're going to be disappointed, because if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. But let's continue at the best way we can. I'm going to try a different way of accessing it, but from those four categories that I've mentioned to you, or 4 levels as we can call it, any questions regarding that? Are you clear with the distinction between the different categories, or the different levels, so to speak? Everybody all good with that? Well, we can also have, and as we see, as you'll see when I do the recording with the slides, there are different approaches that you can now also take, and the 2 main approaches that for us to identify competitors is to firstly have a sort of a customer-based approach, or we can also what they call have a strategic group approach, or and if we differentiate between the 2, your customer-based one is essentially the approach that gives you full recognition to the broader range of products or services that we are capable, or that is capable of satisfying a customer's needs. So it's very much from a customer's approach. In other words, what choice would the customer make? You can maybe ask a customer, for instance, if you are used to using Nescafe coffee, for instance. If Nescafe coffee was not available, if they have to take it off the shelves for an unlimited period, what would your alternative be that you're going to use? So that's one way. I mean, for instance, if a product is not available for a certain time, what would be your second choice, so to speak? That's basically part of this approach that we can take, or the customer-based approach. But you can also ask consumers what they use a particular product for. For instance, some people use Disprin to address low blood pressure, for instance, but that wasn't the intention of why Disprin was in the first place manufactured. It was as a headache tablet to take away a headache. So that's another way that we can determine how customers differentiate between products and what would be their second choice, because if we know what their second choice would be, we would probably be able to identify what our potential competitors are, and then we can strategize accordingly, because we know we cannot control what our competitors do, but we very much can take note of their approaches and their strategies, and try and position ourselves in the market accordingly. The second approach that we can take is a more sort of a strategic approach, where it's very much, and that's why it's also referred to as an industry concept of competition, because it very much refers to a particular industry, and the competitors within a particular industry who or is seen in the context of a particular industry. For instance, all pharmaceutical companies, for instance, they are not going to be competing outside a particular industry. They're all in the same industry. And another examples are, for instance, your soft beverages industry, where you have different manufacturers. You've got Coca-Cola, you've got Pepsi, and they're all within the same industry. So, in a particular industry, what our competitors within a particular industry can operate will very much be determined by a number of factors, like, for instance, the barriers of entry. Is it easy for you to enter a particular industry? Because if it is, the competition will be so much higher, because more people can actually enter that particular market, and therefore it would not be something that you would favorably consider. This is especially where new businesses have developed new products, and I'm not sure where they want to put. They know that the product is in the industry that already exists, and if it's obviously if they realize that it's too easy to enter, there would be too much competition, and they might just maybe pitch their particular product in another category or to another segment, for instance. But that's the value of understanding the dynamics of different industries of the market. Right. Any questions, anybody at this stage? I might also want to just point out at this point to you, if you don't mind, that on your course modules schedule on Canvas, you'll see on that homepage there's also where it says quizzes and discussions and surveys and assignments. There's a survey that we do every 2 weeks. It's completely, I mean, it's not graded. It's where you can contribute and share good and bad experiences, and that's basically where you are telling us, listen, guys, you can improve on this, yeah, obviously it's available to you for the entire week. You can do it anytime. You can spend as much time, and we don't have to do it at all. Okay, so sorry for myself side noting there, but there were 3 things that I wanted to share with you regarding logistics, and those were the class test, the survey, as well as your potential dates for the term test. So while we're on that subject again, the term test is more than likely not going to be next week. It's probably going to be the week after, because if you look at your assessment guide on Canvas, it says that we have to get to chapter 6, and we will only be finished with chapter 6 next week, because our classes are late in the week. If the classes were like Monday and Tuesday next week, it would have been slightly different, because that would have left us with time for revision, as well as time to for you to prepare for the test. But again, the test format, I'll get into greater detail when we do the revision later on. It's going to be similar to what you have and what you will experience today in your class test. The layout will be exactly the same, and you'll get a feel for it when you complete your class test. Okay. Any other questions relating to logistics? Any admin issues that you want to maybe ask me about at the moment?
Hi, sir.
Yes.
So for the survey, some of the questions aren't applicable because they're like, how was the feedback on some of the quizzes that we've done? So we've only done like 2 quizzes, I think, and then we haven't gotten any feedback.
You haven't done any quizzes, and you haven't gotten any feedback yet. So yeah, no. So some of it won't be valid, and but as I said, we'll do about 3 or 4 of these surveys regularly throughout the semester. So don't worry about it. Some of it will become relevant later on, but not all of it will be applicable now.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Right. In your textbook, you'll find it. Oh, and by the way, I know there was a question that I have not provided an answer for. Again, while it's in the front of my mind. I spoke to our librarian this morning because there was a question, I think last week when we had the contact session, if the 5th and 6th edition of your textbook is much different. And if we can, although we work from the yellow 6th edition, if the 5th edition is also going to be fine. She immediately contacted, and obviously that was like 5 minutes before the class started. So she immediately contacted the distributors, Pearson, Oxford University Press, as the to find out if there's a difference and what it would be, if at all. But I'll get back to you tomorrow to confirm if it's okay or not. But I had a look through the book myself, and I couldn't see much difference in the content. Definitely not in the work itself. But maybe 1 or 2 case studies are slightly different. But again, sorry for me going off the topic there, but it was I just realized that there's something I wanted to share and get back to you with as well. Right. Now, when we are defining our competitive when we define we define a market, which is basically everybody that are consumers, are potential prospects. We know that when we get to the next chapter, we'll go into market segmentation, and we'll be targeting specific markets and positioning ourselves in the right place, in the right segment. And when we do that with our competitors, we basically find that there are 4 popular industry structures. The popular industry structures is very much a monopoly, for instance. We also have oligopoly, we have pure competition, and we have monopolistic competition. So if we differentiate between those 4, they are mainly, or the characteristics of the different 4 is that, and let's do it at the hand of examples first, and then maybe you can share examples that you are or brands or products that you are familiar with, and let's identify in which particular structure they would follow. But monopoly basically is where we find ourselves at the moment with Eskom. There's only one big company that almost sort of sets the price and then dominates, and nobody else is. There's actually no competition in that regard. So Eskom is a classic example of that. They have complete monopoly, and although we have passed legislation in our country that will allow us to look at alternative energy sources, it's not formalized yet. But at this moment, that particular industry is one of complete dominance by one major supplier. In this case, it is Eskom. We also find that you can have a pure competition, and that is where there are a lot of companies who are manufacturing and providing similar products. There's not a lot of differentiation between products, and there's a lot of people, like farmers, for instance. There's a lot of farmers who farm with wheat, for instance, but there's also a lot of buyers. So they're also not just supplying for one particular buyer, but you'll find that pure competition is pretty much easy to enter. The barriers to entry is very limited, if at all. almost anybody who has a farm in the area with the right climate for farming with wheat, for instance, can enter the market, can plant it, and can supply it to the buyers. So a lot of buyers, also a lot of sellers offering similar products, if not exactly the same product, and therefore it's probably a market that, because of those specific characteristics that we've identified, not a lot of new entrants would seriously consider. If it is one component of somebody who farms with variety of items, products, then maybe yes, because then you're not reliant just on let's say, for instance, your wheat. You also find, if it's not a if it wasn't a great season, you'll be okay, but because you're not just reliant on that. Then we have oligopolies. And oligopoly is where there are a few small suppliers. They don't who dominate the market. For instance, if you look at, for instance, the mobile market in South Africa, between Vodacom, MTN, and Cell C, they basically supply 91% of mobile-related products and services to the industry. So there's three ones who basically supply the entire market. It would therefore be very difficult. If you look at, for instance, out of the number of people who have cell phone packages and contracts, 43 million, just over 43 million people actually have Vodacom as a supplier, as a service provider, sorry. I think about 31 million MTN subscribers, and then Cell Cs are about 17%. So it's very difficult for instance, Telkom to get in, and for another, or for Rain, for instance, or any of these new entrants into the market to actually to be really competitive in a particular industry. And then you have monopolistic competition. There's very few barriers, again, to enter that particular market. The products that is offered are fairly similar, and there's a lot of people offering it, and there's very little distinction between it. For instance, if we look at hotels, there are many hotels, and the one gives you maybe a few additional features than the other, but there's no real difference between what they specialize in. Hairdressers, for instance, there are many hairdressers, and they main function is still that they perform is to cut hair, and that's it. And yeah, maybe the one offers you a free cappuccino with your visit, but there are not that much difference between the different competitors in a particular industry, and it very much, the prices are also very much the same as well. So it becomes a sort of a localized business, that you have a ceiling on your clientele, and you very much service a particular area, regional, geographical area, and operate in a region. You don't find too many of them successful on a national basis, or even bigger. Any questions at this point? Everybody fine? I mean, what other examples can you maybe share with me, or which other companies come to mind that you maybe want to see what, or how you see them? Or let's say, for instance, no, you give me examples. You give me examples. What is, for instance, give me another example of an oligopoly, for instance. remember oligopoly? Small number of suppliers who basically run the entire market. Anybody with an example of oligopoly? Another example than the one that I gave about the cell phone companies?
So could it be like post office services, like delivery services, or not?
It could be. It could very much be. I mean, let's just take it as an example, and let's look at the characteristics of that particular industry and see if it where we can position itself. Are you talking specifically delivery services, like for instance, like DHL, for instance, competing with other FedEx, for instance? Are we along those lines?
Yes, sir.
I think we can safely say that, yes, because that it's probably a very good example of a oligopoly, yes. They are competing directly with each other globally. Then they're also, because they're not all, both of them are present in all the countries where the other one is. I think, therefore, if you look at the global market, for instance, I would say that the biggest share lies between those two, and they would probably, because not one of them actually have a monopoly in that market. It's a very good example of a oligopoly, yes, because if we look at global market share, the joint market share would probably be in excess of 80%, around about 80%. And then you'll find in particular countries, maybe there are competitors that, like in our case, the postal services, but we don't know how functional they'll be and for how long they'll still be a service. But then you also have in South Africa, we've got Postnet, for instance, who also offer that service, but Postnet is not necessarily available globally. They might be available in Africa, but I'm not sure that they are available internationally on the same scale as, say, FedEx and DHL, for instance. But yeah, that they would qualify as oligopoly, yes, for sure.
So,
yes.
Would a company like De Beers classify as an oligopoly, like if you were to use it in the context of just South Africa?
In the context of just South Africa, who would you rate as De Beers' strongest competitors?
So I did a project on this when I was still in matric, and I believe that there's only like 3 major diamond miners in South Africa.
Anglo American, maybe one.
Yes, I think that was one of them. Yeah, but I think De Beers was leagues ahead of them with clientele wise and company size and that.
It often happens, yes, where you initially, if you're the first one, and if you're the first one to mine diamonds, for instance, for a while you'll have a monopoly because you won't have any competitors until somebody else comes in and say, hang on, wait a minute, we're also in the mining industry. I mean, you might as well start mining for diamonds as well, because we now had a look at what you do and where you mine and where the most likely areas are for us to find diamonds. And maybe, yes, we can diversify our business and enter that, and they become competitors, and they have become competitors. But it is another example of maybe maximum 3 rather large companies who dominate a particular market. Yes, without a doubt, they would qualify as an oligopoly as well, if we look at what the business structure or how to classify the business structure. Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure, no problem. Anybody else?
Petrol stations?
Petrol stations, yes. All the different brands. I mean, and you know what? Because the price is set as well, you can't charge. Guys, I haven't been up in Gauteng for a very long time. The price is up. Inland is still different to coast, eh? Marginal, but there are different prices for let's say what's it, 95 lead free, or it's still exactly it's not exactly the same price. There's a marginal difference because obviously the petrol has to be transported. So there is a bit of a difference, but there is a sort of a suggested price and price ceiling. The price is very similar. The price is very similar. The product is very similar as well. Do you really believe? Do you think it's just limited to sort of very clever marketing that the one, or do you believe that the one brand is so much better than the other? Is it all petroleum pretty much the same? Yes.
My father also worked in the fuel industry, so I know. So basically, petrol prices are obviously set on oil prices, so that changes in the market. And also, but diesel, you can make your own price. You don't have to follow those prices. Diesel is completely, each petrol station sets their own diesel price. It's more or less the same, but you can decide your price for diesel.
Yeah, then it very much, I think it becomes, I think it's almost become, because it's not a total, you can probably say, I can't, there's no one particular brand like Engine or BP or Shell that comes to mind as to being completely dominant in the market, or a few of them are dominating the market. I think there's definitely room for different brands to enter. It could be it could be between oligopoly and maybe peer competition, because the product is very similar, and the price is sort of predetermined and set, and it's not set by Engine, it's set by the regulating body that says all petrol brands have to sell a particular product at a certain price, or at the same price, basically. So yeah, it could probably be both. I think what we'll have to do is probably in greater detail investigate the other characteristics that like entry barriers into a particular industry. How easy is it for another petrol brand to enter that particular industry, and not just survive but compete? Have any new ones recently entered that particular industry? I think it can be, it finds itself very difficult between the two. I would say more sort of towards pure competition and actually oligopoly structure. Airlines in South Africa, now that Mango has been in the news yesterday, for those who haven't heard, Mango cancelled all their flights yesterday, or all their flights were cancelled yesterday because they didn't pay their bills. And then all of a sudden, last night, they did pay their bills, and today they're flying again. But it's been very much in the news. I know that. What would you say about industry like that? Is there what type of structure would you find in the airline business? Anybody? Yes, sorry.
I don't know if I'm answering this like correctly, but
no, that's not the point. The point is for us to actually discuss it so we can actually determine it, because we don't know until we actually unpack it. So yes, please share.
So wouldn't like airlines base their pricing on obviously the fuel for the airplane to get from point A to point B? That has pretty much a set price, and then you can like base it off of that, whether you want to charge a bit more or stay closer to like the cheaper side, obviously depending on the like luxury of the airplane that you've chosen to take, like versus Mango versus like Etihad will obviously differ in price because of one is more luxury than the other, but like a baseline to determine pricing for airlines that are in like a similar category would be like off of their fuel prices as well, in a way. I don't know.
I think again, you've opened the conversation, and that's what the session is about, to encourage the conversation and to have a look at it and say, listen, I'm not sure about this, so let's discuss it. I think we can look at it in two different on two different levels. Firstly, I don't think there's globally we can say there's somebody who really stands out as the best in the industry, because there are many of the airlines who only fly local. So if we look at it on a local basis, I think for very long there was in South Africa with SAA, I'm talking about the way back 70s, 80s, it was very much monopoly. It was state-owned South African Airways, and that was the only one. If you want to fly from Cape Town to Durban, you had two choices, SAA or SAA. You wanted to fly to Durban, it was SAA, SAA, or SAA. So total monopoly. That has changed, and the entrance into the market, it is very difficult to enter a market that's where there's a monopoly, like we've determined with Eskom. I think once once those barriers have been broken, and very often legislation leads to that, to allow competition. I think what happened is that because of our sanctions during the 70s and 80s, economic and international sanctions, because of our political status, there weren't too many. South African Airways weren't allowed at the majority of destinations. So for people to fly internationally, they had to use international airlines like British Airways, and they weren't even Emirates Airways at that stage, but they were using KLM and different and Air Italy and different airlines to fly internationally. And once we have, in 1994, we've become a democracy, the competition was open, so to speak, and South African Airlines realized then that in our country, although we can now also compete internationally, it also means that the other airlines who were only flying international flights from South Africa, because we were barred from doing that, can now also become competitive for us domestically to fly local flights. Cape Town, Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg. You fly on British Airways. It wasn't just SAA doing that anymore. So initially, I think, yes, it was very difficult to enter that particular market. It still very much is at the moment, I think, very difficult to enter such a particular market. But because of the cost involved, you can't just go, right, I've got a couple of pilots who lost their jobs because of the pandemic and have some cash stashed away somewhere, and let's start an airline. It's not that simple. So the cost factor very much is also an issue that prevented a lot of that prevented new entrance into the market. I would very much say that it's in my opinion more a sort of an example of a peer competition structure, because there's healthy competition between different airlines. They run different specials, and the cost per passenger, it's pretty much similar to everybody if they fly the same destinations. And it very often, the choices from a consumer point of view is very much determined by which destination I want to go to and which airlines will fly to that destination. And therefore, I'd say, yeah, it's pretty much the same. You can't really enter the market now in South Africa and say, listen, we've got Mango, we've got Kulula, we've got SAA, and we are going to blow them out the water, and we're going to offer our flights at half price to what the sort of the industry standard is, and what our competitors offer. you won't survive. Your business is going to maybe take off for a month or so, but there are enough options. So I'm pretty sure we can probably say that the distinguishing features from one airline to the other is not that great. Therefore, there's a lot of competition, which goes a lot of businesses offering it. And your choices will pretty much be determined by personal preference more than anything else. I would say more sort of a more example of a pure competitive market. Yes. Anybody else? Any new ideas?
Sorry, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm always talking. I want to with agricultural markets.
Yes.
Why would they not be seen necessarily as a supplier of in the large number of suppliers section, since they aren't necessarily they're supplying companies with the raw materials to create the products to sell?
There's not one particular. It's very much regionalized. There are not too many. Very often, the buyers buy directly from farmers. I know that at some point, I think a good example would probably be, for instance, the currently it's known as the Stel. For those who are from the Western Cape would know that a company like the Stel, they have sherries and wines that they manufacture and distribute. And how they originated, they were originally called the Stellenbosch Farmers Winery. So what happened is, instead of every single farmer making wine and bottling wine and exporting wine and selling wine and going from one supplier, Pick and Pay, to Checkers, to another bottle store, for instance, to try and sell their wines to them so they can sell it to the public. Stellenbosch Farmers Winery said, guys, all of you in Stellenbosch, you're more than welcome to still do that on your own if you have the capacity on your farm. But bring your grapes to us, and we will actually then make the wine and distribute the wine on your behalf, and we pay you a rather handsome percentage. And that is an example of where in a particular region there's one supplier who most of the farmers supply to, but that's not copied elsewhere, because it's very much in agriculture. It's determined by the climate. So you won't find too many wine farms up in Limpopo, for instance, or in certain regions of our country, and therefore you can't really copy that particular structure. But in the broader agricultural industry, there are similar examples. For instance, depending on which produce is being farmed with, there are certain restrictions because we're working with food. We are fresh meats, milk, cheeses, products that the consumers use on a daily basis. So we have to look at hygiene and all these kind of things. And they are very strict health or very strict health restrictions on the suppliers, and therefore the farmers are not necessarily going to sell all their products themselves. But there are too many buyers, there are too many buyers in the industry that any one particular one of them actually have a great market share or big market share, for instance. It's very equally distributed market share between the different ones, Agrimark and all of these, for instance. But it's very regionalized, and therefore, yeah, it finds itself in that situation where there's a healthy competition, because there are people will go for 5 cents difference in price to a different buyer, for instance, and then that's what a farmer's farm. They want to sell their products for the highest price they can, and if it's that easy to switch from suppliers or from buyers, it becomes a healthy competition, therefore qualifying itself as a pure competitive market, so to speak. Guys, I think with all the technical issues I've had today, I'm going to cut this short at this point. I'll put this recording up, but I'll also do a visual recording of today's session. I know that we are going to quickly go into a staff meeting within the next 5 minutes or so. But if there's any questions, you're more than welcome to ask me at this point. Otherwise, as I said, yeah, we'll chat again tomorrow. We've got a double period tomorrow. We'll definitely finish chapter 4. I'll have feedback on the status of the 5th and the 6th edition of your textbooks, if you can use either one of them, and I'll be clearer on the dates for your term test. I have dates for your exam dates in June, but I can't share that with you at this point until we have not determined your until we haven't determined your term test dates, but that will be fixed tomorrow, and I will share it with you tomorrow. Any questions, anybody?
So we can comfortably scratch out the term test that was meant to be on the 6th.
I had a look at it again, and yeah, I would say definitely, without a doubt, I would feel more comfortable, and I will be able to justify it to be moved to the following week, for instance. I would also, because of the nature of the nature of the semester, the time that we have available, I will very easily, yeah, we go, Rick. We will be able to, I'll feel much more comfortable if it's not on a day that you actually have class. Would you share that sentiment with me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. We'll see you again tomorrow if everything goes well. I'll upload this recording for you, and then also a visual one, and then we can chat again tomorrow. Tomorrow, third and fourth periods. Remember, Friday times are different, okay? Thank you very much, guys. We'll chat again tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Sure. Same to you. Thank you very much.